Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to the Gang of Three. Our third member, Lane Adkins, is headed on in here, although he may be in cartoon form when he arrives. I'm not sure. It depends on how well his camera is working tonight. Pete Smith, how you doing, brother?
I am all right. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I guess. Getting into the action here a little bit quickly as the Cleveland Browns made a trade today. We are really, they had an interesting week. I think we're starting to get a sense of what this iteration of the Browns with Todd Monken and a new coaching staff is all about. We had Andrew Barry talk at the Combine. We had Todd Monken talk at the Combine. The Browns traded for an offensive lineman today, and they continue to explore the quarterback position. But, Pete, if you listen closely to what Monken and especially Andrew Barry was saying, you didn't hear a lot of certainty. It's all about flexibility and contingency planning. It seems like a team that's sort of looking for opportunities. Offensive line move today suggests some urgency. The quarterback exploration suggests that they don't fully trust that room. But the tone of the podium this week was very careful and calculated and non-committal. This feels like a franchise preparing for multiple outcomes, not one clear direction. So tonight we are asking, do the Browns have a plan, or are they just going to react to the opportunities that come across their path? One of the questions we want to try to answer today. Here to help us answer it, in addition to Pete, we have Mr. Lane Adkins. How you doing, Lane?
Good. How are you?
I am doing okay. Glad to see you here. If you listen to my ramble, I was talking a little bit about the Browns coming off, to me at least, like they're just sort of waiting to play the field, that they don't have a definitive plan in place for what they're going to do this offseason. How wrong am I, Lane?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say you're wrong, but I think they do have a plan. They as much as told you that they were going to address the offensive line, and they were going to go after that and try to solidify those issues. And they've already started that with a move that has been done that won't be official to the 11th, and getting a starting quality caliber offensive tackle, versatile guy who can play guard and tackle. So it's an interesting pickup, one that's much needed, and you start developing your offensive line. I also listened to you about the quarterback position and what they said, and that you're dead nuts on. They have too much uncertainty, vast uncertainty, much more than Todd Monken is really comfortable with. He wants to have a quarterback established and know what he's going to go with, and that's another angle that they're going to be looking at to do something efficiently and effectively to provide them the greatest opportunity to have stability under center as well.
Well, this team knows what it needs, Pete. It needs offensive linemen, it needs wide receiver, maybe needs a quarterback. But do you think that they have a scheme? Lane says that there's a plan. They know basically what they're going to do. Do you think that there's a plan in place, or do you think Andrew Barry is going to just jump on the opportunities that come his way?
I think that is a plan. I think Titus Howard, for example, they're saying he's going to be a right tackle, but he could easily play guard. He can play in a zone or gap scheme. He's done both. So the beautiful thing is when you need to replace 5 offensive linemen, you don't have to be picky in terms of the opportunities that come your way. So if they're not just looking for a tackle, so if another tackle were to come open, they could theoretically say, Titus, we're going to move you to guard, and we're going to roll this way because it's the best 5 we have on there. And Titus Howard played 3 positions last year, so that is in a sense a plan. Todd Monken is a guy who prides himself on being able to sort of plan around the talent he has. So in that sense. And the same thing you could say about quarterback. The quarterback room is not good enough. But it just sort of depends, because if, there's a whole bunch of quarterbacks that theoretically could get released. If the Browns wanted to, and they say, listen, rather than have a guy get released, we'll give you a 5th round pick and we'll give you something to get said quarterback and sort of pick a direction. And if they all get released, they can sort of see where it goes. But the Browns aren't in a great position right this second to sort of woo anyone at the start of free agency. They are more going to be attractive for guys who are sort of out in the market and have had a chance to sort of build up this unit and give them sort of a look before they get that quarterback. So that in itself to me is a plan being so able to be opportunistic, but just a Howard deal makes a lot of sense for them. In some ways, maybe you can argue it kicks the can down the road a little bit because you're getting what's going to be a 30-year-old tackle, but you don't want to necessarily have to do the whole unit at once if you can help it.
Right.
And then there's this element where people are sort of down on Titus Howard thinking, well, if the Houston Texans are getting rid of a lineman, he must be terrible. Well, he was their best lineman last year. And then the other part of that is it seems to me that the Houston Texans have sort of an internal rule where they don't want to pay premium dollars for somebody who's 30 or older. And Titus Howard certainly fits that category. But the Texans surprised the hell out of everybody when they traded Laramie Tunsil, who was about to be 30 years old, and traded him to the Washington Commanders at a time when they still had no linemen. So I think Titus Howard is fine. I hope, I hope the Browns are right and that he can sort of sustain for the next 2 seasons, since I assume that's what the contract is really for. But that is sort of the risk with taking somebody in what's going to be on the wrong side of 30 from that standpoint. Right.
Well, Lane, ESPN gave this trade a D- for the Browns.
Of course they did.
ESPN loves everything the Browns do. But would you give him a D-, Lane? Do you think that this is a canny pickup?
I don't even know how the 4-letter media conglomerate could even come up with such a bullshit take to start with. A D-. You've got yourself a starting offensive lineman that you basically give up a 5th-round pick for, and you have to pay the guy. And it's going to be structured that, in a couple of years, they're going to end up getting out of that deal too, just like they do every other deal that they do except freaking Deshaun Watson. So, let's get over it. Let's get over all the BS and the narratives that are out there because, you got national media and local media running wild with all these insane thoughts and opinions about what they're doing. This guy can play. The numbers prove it. The stats prove it. The tape proves it. The guy can play the game. And you have nobody there. It opens up opportunities. Maybe KT Levinston, maybe gets a look at guard now that since we found out that George Warhop is sort of curious about him. You don't know if Joel Bentonio's coming back. There's all kind of things that are going to happen here, and it's nothing that we didn't note and say before this whole shebang kicked off. We've been talking about it the past few weeks, that they were going to go out and aggressively try to obtain a couple offensive linemen. Well, one down, and you're going to see the same thing come into play at wide receiver. They're going to look for a wide receiver so they can piggyback and couple that when they get to the draft with additional talent. They're just trying to solidify the roster where all these deficiencies are, so they can run the ball. They can throw the ball. Maybe the quarterback has a chance to be efficient. It's just part of the strategy. This is just the very first step of what's going to be a very interesting offseason for the Cleveland Browns.
What's interesting, the basis for the argument for ESPN is basically the money, which is curious because they don't know the structure of the contract. If it's 40 some odd million guaranteed, yeah, it raises an eyebrow. But here's the thing. Titus Howard is the big difference is he's going to be 30. Rasheed Walker is potentially going to be getting a massive contract that's going to be competitive and potentially in the range of what the Titans gave their left Daniel Moore last year.
Right.
$91 million. And
insanity.
And if the Browns were to have or somebody made that deal, there are going to be people going, that's a great move. They need to solidify the left tackle position, and they're getting a guy who can do that. And maybe he's average, but maybe he'll get better. Okay, well, the Browns are doing that for much less money, and they did it for effectively trading Kenny Pickett. So you are trading a quarterback who was no longer part of your plan for an offensive lineman who can start for you and play good football, and maybe play better football last year than Rasheed Walker did for the Packers. So, that's fine if they want to base it off the money. My question here is, how on earth did they end up with the Texans getting an A- out of this thing? Because they have no linemen. Not only do they not have Titus Howard, now they obviously just traded Juice Scruggs. CJ Stroud has completely regressed as a quarterback, in no small part because they have absolutely dismantled the line over the past couple of years, and he's developed some really bad habits. So, I understand the idea of, hey, we don't want to pay for potentially a diminishing prospect, which is sensible, except Titus Howard is literally coming off the best season of his career. So obviously, look, the goal is he's going to play similar to the level he did this past year, but it's really valuable for the Browns because they're getting a guy who's getting hype, has got nothing but high praise in terms of like how he's viewed by the Texans players, how he's viewed by the media in terms of the type of person he is. Because he literally jumped in at left guard, and right tackle last year and just said, listen, man, I'm trying to do what's best for the team. I'm trying to help out as best I can without an ego, without anything else. And for a team that needs to build this unit that's going to potentially have 5 new faces up front, they need guys like Titus Howard to be able to get this thing going, be like, yeah, man, we just need to get in here, get to work, and have professionals operating for that. So that's fine. These are one of those things where I don't really care how it's viewed. I think ESPN's grades on that are pretty silly because everybody's going to sit here and go, well, the Browns need to throw gobs of money at average linemen. They did basically the same thing. They just did it ahead of time, and we'll get it at a much more reasonable rate.
Yeah, Lane, you put some stuff in Rumor Central today, and I know that recently some of your blogs and insider discussion and so forth, you've talked a little bit or tried to think a little bit about what George Warhop wants as an offensive lineman. You think Howard fits into that category?
That trade wouldn't have been made if it wasn't something that your head coach and offensive lineman didn't see as being very viable for what they want to do here. The thing is too is that with Warhop, there's versatility. It's not nobody knows exactly what he's going to do yet because it's going to depend on the talent that comes together. So it's like we said, we go back, it's step by step, and we see what we're going to do here. It's ludicrous when you listen to these reporters and media people and radio shows and everybody talking about and bitching about the money that the Browns have paid. These are the same people who talk about the Browns have negative salary cap money and they can't make any deals and they can't sign anybody. And the understanding is that learn what you're talking about and what you're looking at before you do so, because you make an ass out of yourself. This is just the first move. And if he's a $20 million man for a couple of years, he's a $20 million man. The salary cap manipulation is all about monopoly money and how you just throw it away. I have zero reservations about getting a starting quality offensive tackle who can play guard for you and have him for 2 years. And whatever happens after that happens, because by then you should have, if you're a responsible organization and general manager, start bringing in talent that you can develop instead of keeping on this evolution of a couple years, get somebody else, and push money down the road. This is just the beginning of things that we're going to see as a different Cleveland Browns organization, which started last year.
I'll worry about the salary cap when Jack Duffin tells me to worry about the salary cap. And he hasn't sent up any rocket flares recently, so I'm not too worried about it. Pete, what do you think about Howard's fit into the line? You think he's a model of what we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, based on what I've seen from, conversations with Lane and just knowing what I know of Titus Howard and just offensive line in general, he has the things you look for: ballast, long arms, big body, and effective in pass protection. And the rest you've got to work for. And some of that's going to be, I know one of the critiques of him is, well, he's not a great run blocker. Well, the goal for the Browns, for the Houston Texans, he was their best lineman. The goal for the Browns is if they can get to a position where he's like their third best lineman, they're doing pretty good. Can you get a nice tight end that can put their hand on the ground like Charlie Kolar and put him next to him, and an ass kicking guard next to him, and suddenly they can get off the ball and move people? Then you're going to be in good shape. But that's the work that's yet to do. It's one guy. It's the only guy so far, but it's an important one. They need to start getting these things going. So it's good that they've got this one done ahead of time. They aren't going into free agency without anything done. It gives them a little bit of a leg up for that. And again, it gives them the ability where if an opportunity comes along and goes, hey, there's another tackle we can grab, they can do it and move Howard around. So it's a good setup from that standpoint.
Yeah, that move, this doesn't necessarily mean that the Browns aren't going to keep addressing or looking at the tackle position in free agency, in trade, in the draft. It doesn't prohibit them from doing any of that, because this is a guy who can slide inside and play guard if need be, if they come across a bargain or an opportunity to get somebody that maybe they shouldn't have gotten. This is what you do. He's one of five. And that's how you look at it, and that's where you start, because you have one piece that can play three different spots.
One of the things I've heard a little bit is that he prefers to play right tackle, but obviously last year he played several different positions, as Pete said. And, if you find a right tackle out there in the draft, or, someone who you really like at that particular position, pretty sure he's not going to stomp out of camp if you move him to right guard.
Well, no, he's getting paid like a tackle.
Yeah, I mean that's really where that comes down to. It's more of money. Look, there's certainly an ego element to it. Being a tackle certainly carries certain elements to it, but he's got the money, so I don't think he cares at that point. But more importantly, it's where are the Browns better? If run blocking is a concern for them, is he going to be more of a liability theoretically as a run blocker if he's inside versus outside? I think just looking at how Andrew Berry has operated, and presume like most teams tend to operate, they're going to want guys who can really run block on the interior if they can help it. So that's the one thing where I can sit here and go, yeah, well, he probably is better suited for tackle in this regard. But in terms of pass protection, he's a better guard, because if they have a very credible tackle, then their whole group is sort of upgraded. So it really just depends on what you're asking them to do.
Well, and another situation is that when people look at how an offensive line is constructed or how the game is played, everybody puts all this ultimate focus on the tackles because, they're taking on rushers off the edge or things like that. The only problem is that the guard position is just important, maybe more so, especially when you look at the Cleveland situation and the inside, the interior of the line. So I'm not too concerned about that, because I believe that they do have something in play that they're looking to address with that. So you take today as a win, and you got your tackle, and you see where you go from there.
I swear I've heard somebody say that guard is as important as tackle, if not more so, before on this program, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely. Guard is huge. And not only is it more important, increasingly important because of the run blocking element, but look at what your division has. You have Madubuike, who seemingly is going to be back for the Ravens. They have no edge rushers. So Madubuike is their best guy. The Pittsburgh Steelers have Cam Hayward and 2 first-round picks all on the interior. The Cincinnati Bengals need all the help they can get on the defensive line, but if they pick a guy like Caleb Downs, the kid from Florida, buyer beware in terms of a lot of it, but he's 6'6", 330 something with massive long arms and this great athlete. You got to have somebody who can handle that. So the amount of things they can throw at you, and then just the way the NFL works, where if you're not good inside, you see twists and stunts and all these other things where guards get exposed and all these elements where the Browns have had issues with that, being able to make the communications, being able to make the swaps and everything else. But the other thing is quarterbacks hate having to deal in a pocket where their feet are, with a muddy pocket where they can't step up or they can't see. And this has been a thing for the Browns, obviously with Baker Mayfield, who was not as tall. They certainly fortified the line in front of him. They had Joe Bitonio, they had Wyatt Teller, they had J.C. Treader and then Ethan Postic, all making premium dollars at various points. They made that a huge focus, as they should. But got to get off the ball. You got to be able to run it. And Todd Monken wants to be able to run the football. Then, yeah, guard is huge. And that's why, I'm not going to immediately assume, as many people are, that this automatically means that the Browns are going to draft a left tackle at 6.
Yeah,
we're getting. Go ahead, Mike.
I wouldn't go that far yet at 6 with the Browns, because we have a long way to go. And sitting at 6, you may have just some prime opportunities otherwise that you don't have to feel pressured or backed into a corner looking for a left tackle there, especially as we get through this trade market and free agency to see what can transpire and see where you're at. Because when you're sitting holding 6 and 24, the opportunity is you can get a playmaker, or you can slightly move down and couple that with another pick. So, right now it's too early. But the identity of this team is that they want to run the freaking football. They're going to protect the quarterback. And that's the nuts and bolts of it. And that's why this move is important.
Yeah, so you don't think that this right tackle is going to impact what they do at 6 and 24, do you?
No.
Have ripple effects and
in fact, I think a lot of people are thinking it shrinks the conversation. I think it grows it substantially. But for one thing, my theory of the case the entire way has been the offensive line supply is good enough to sustain all the way to 39. If you are trying to get a top playmaker at receiver, you're not going to be able to wait. You're not going to be able to do it. Like Carnell Tate, especially if you're sitting there going, the Browns need to get an X. He's it. There's no other X until that fits the mold of that type of guy. If that's what you want, Carnell Tate can be an X and Z. He can do that. If they want to get, we'll see what happens with this whole Mekhi Lemon thing. If that's bears fruit or if he's just a different kind of guy, whatever. But if you don't get like those guys, you are basically either praying that Mekhi Lemon's issues drop him to 24. You're praying that Casey Concepcion lasts, or you are then settling for guys who profile more as number 2s. And that's not going to feel very good at the 24th pick. So that's one element of it. But the other is now, if, this does allow them theoretically to now just play best player available with one of those picks. Like we go into this thing with no moves made, and we sit there and go, well, they've got to get 2 offensive linemen or playmaker. Well, if they do moves like Titus Howard, it sort of lessens the reality that they have to do a certain thing. And they can just get players they want. And you'll hear Andrew Berry says it every year. We operate as if we're an expansion team. Well, an expansion team tries to focus on talent. So Andrew Berry's goal is going to get to set his team up in a position to be able to get the best players available. Now, there are certain things that are always more difficult to get than others. Certainly a top level wide receiver is going to be the hardest thing for them to get, other than like a pure, a franchise left tackle. Those 2 things are really difficult to get. But then you have to play the scarcity game. Which one's better? Where are your other options?
Listen, they don't intend on walking into this season being a 3, 4, 5-win team. Their expectation is that they're going to win games. And that's how they're going to be coached. That's how they're going to go after talent. And that's how they're going to attack this thing. The more that they can accomplish in trade and free agency is going to enable them to have further opportunities when they get to the draft to, couple themselves on the opportunity to get the playmaker, what they drastically need. It gives you an opportunity to get that lineman that you drastically need. That's why all this stuff that we're going through right now, that's going to start when this league season officially starts on the 11th, that is going to be the most important thing that we can see the Cleveland Browns do, is what they can accomplish in this open market, which they have already said that, they're going to be active. They may not be as active or aggressive as they say next year, but they have the capabilities to make moves to help solidify and fortify things, to give them opportunities when you get into this draft to make moves that maybe you don't see coming here in March 1st, March 2nd. But the picture becomes clear when that draft comes.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Tell you what, when they go look at left tackle, when they look at the other tackle position, I guess my expectation is that they're not going to go out there and make a splash signing. I know Pete referred to Rasheed Walker earlier here, that they're not going to go out and make a splash signing, that they're going to continue to look for value because they have so many positions to fill, and they've still got the weight of the Watson contract on them and all that sort of stuff. I mean, Andrew Berry went out and said that, they're going to be more aggressive in free agency in 2027. That's when they're going to be hyper aggressive, I think was the term that he used. And I guess I just, given the number of holes that they have to fill, I don't see them spending a ton of money on a splash signing on the offensive line. Linderbaum maybe at the outside, but I'm not seeing anything bigger than that.
It comes down to return on investment. If you're going to pay premium dollars, you got to get premium return. So Tyler Linderbaum, if you pay that much, you're getting a top of the line center. That's the expectation. That is my issue, and why I don't think the Browns are going to be all that active on a guy like Rasheed Walker is because you're paying what would be premium dollars, and you're then hoping he's going to become a premium return on investment. Because right now he's an average left tackle. Because if he wasn't an average left tackle, Green Bay would not be letting him hit the free agent market. Green Bay is telling you that we don't think he's worth $20 million or whatever it's going to end up a season. So that is not to say that they couldn't be wrong about that. But again, Dan Moore is the example. Dan Moore gets we'll see how much money he actually gets on the contract, but a contract worth up to $91 million to be the Titans left tackle that was immediately mocked the second the contract was signed as being a ridiculous overpay. That's the type of stuff the Browns need to avoid. So if they can get a Linderbaum and get the premium return on investment, great, because at least the dollars are doing what you want dollars to do. It's when you're overextending money for guys that cannot deliver, then you can get some of these other guys, and it's potentially going to be guys coming off injuries. If it's a Braxton Jones that can play left tackle, if it's an Elijah Vera Tucker, which is a really interesting option at guard.
Yes.
Now with the Titus Howard move, that becomes very intriguing. There's a lot of guys like that where you're going to try to say, listen, I know they have some injury issues, but now we're going to get guys at where the dollars make sense. And if the guy breaks out, okay, he's here for a year, we let him walk, and potentially maybe we'll get some compensatory value or whatever. But we're not going to get caught up in the idea of basically doing like what the Chargers just did, where Philadelphia signed Mekhi Becton for a year, got a great year out of him, won the Super Bowl. And then the Chargers turned around and said, oh, he's going to be like this for the next several years, signed him to a bigger money deal. And then he reverted right back to being, the unreliable player that he's been. So it just comes down to, where do the dollars and cents make sense? It's the same thing with wide receiver. It's why I don't have any interest in signing a free agent wide receiver, because the payoff and the return is never works out in your favor. You've got to deal with those in the draft or trade.
No, and that's when you look at, especially the wide receiver position. If Andrew Berry doesn't make a deal in the relative early days in free agency, when this league season opens, the likelihood that that's going to happen is going to be something that's pushed off until late into the offseason, just due to the fact of player availability and contract. They're not going to just go out and throw money. This is an economics thing that we're going to look at here. They're not going to go out and throw a boatload at left tackle when you look at the available left tackles, or potentially available left tackles, are not in that caliber that you say, hey, I got to have this guy. I'm going to drop that $90 million on this guy. That guy isn't there. At least from what we've seen, that guy isn't there. And then we talked about guards, and Pete brought up Vera Tucker that we've talked about here in the ATI and Rumor Central. That's a guy that's going to be really interesting to see what transpires with him, because he's somebody that he fits what they do here, or they want to do here. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. So you sit here and you're looking at this thing on March 2nd, and you're going, well, what are they going to do next? Believe me, guys, buckle up, because there's going to be a lot of chatter, and it's just going to be depending on, what teams are going to want to do something before Andrew Berry moves to the next one, because that's what he does.
Well, I mean, it has to be the lesson of the Deshaun Watson deal.
Yep.
Don't put it all in one move. You've got to make a series of smart moves and this is the stuff where, like, when people evaluate Andrew Berry, they always don't include these type of moves, which are small moves, which make your team better for very little in terms of cost. A 5th-round pick to get a starting caliber tackle is good business. The deal they made to get Cam Robinson last year was good business, even if Cam Robinson wasn't the player that you hoped he would be, because you gave up very little for him. The trick for the Browns is don't mess up the big ones, and more importantly, don't try to make the big ones as often as possible. Try to spread out your risk as much as possible. Try to do what they did with the Mason Graham situation, where you turned 1 pick into 3 picks, and you hit really hard on the picks you made with Mason Graham, who looks terrific and looks even better as we sort of look at the defensive tackle class coming out this year, because he just looks substantially better than everybody else that they could have gotten this year. Quinshon Judkins looked good. Obviously, he needs to get healthy, and if they get him a whole lot more blocking, then he's going to look that much better. So they've just got to be smart and continue to make the right moves as opposed to trying to make the big moves.
All right. Well, so we've been talking about offensive tackles. We've been talking about the offensive line. Mentioned wide receiver a little bit. I've got a typically stupid Barry question, which is how many wide receivers does this team need, right? I mean, we've got Judy. We need a stud opposite Judy. We've got Isaiah Bond. But we're going into this draft. Are we thinking we need that one stud in the first round, and then after that we can focus on other things? Or do we need to draft multiple wide receivers and really fish out there to fill up that room?
Well, you need to acquire a stud wide receiver in some manner. It's either you're trading for him, you're signing him, or you're drafting him. You need that just from the get-go. And then you need those troops that come behind it. So this is going to be an offseason where you're going to need a couple wide receivers. And they will achieve that in some manner. Maybe not the ones that we want to see happen, but in some way they're going to achieve that. Because it's not like the wide receiver room is decapitated and there's nothing there and they just suck. There's a lot of things that played into the garbage of what we seen offensive football be last year. So what it comes down to is, I don't know if you agree with me, Pete, but you need a stud. You have no choice. You need a stud.
Well, I agree with that 100%. They need one wide receiver. They just need the wide receiver. The guy who's going to set everybody else up. The guy who's going to make Jerry Jeudy into a 2, who would be a very good 2 if they get the quarterback position right. And then you have Cedric Tillman on the final year of his contract who can settle right to a 3. You've got Bond, who looks like a very good 4. And you've got guys like Malachi Corley, who's a really interesting 5. If you get that guy, if you draft Carnell Tate, or you take Mekhi Lemon, or you trade for a Brian Thomas Jr., just to throw a name out there, everything else is a great opportunity, because I think you only need one. But if let's say you take Carnell Tate at 6, and you're just going down the board and you're sitting there in round 4 and you go, holy crap, I didn't expect this guy to be here. Then you take him and you're just like, okay, we've got this other opportunity. But my sort of operating theory on this whole thing is I want to get one top of the line weapon this year. And then I want to come back and get another pretty early weapon next year. Because at least if you do it that way, 1, 2027's class is outstanding, at least from a weapon standpoint. And 2, it allows you to sort of see if these other things are working. Like, is Jamari Thrash going to be anything? Are they going to be able to develop Malachi Corley into something? Is Isaiah Bond going to take another step? It allows you to sort of answer those questions without sort of getting a cluttered situation where you're sitting there going, we have all these guys and we don't really know what we're getting with any of them. And it's, again, if the opportunity is great and they can't help themselves and they go, we love this guy, great. But I'd rather do it in those steps, because the other part of that equation is I want them to get that number 1 receiver type, which they can do, and then really set their tight end room up. I think that's where the rest of the efforts this year need to be, and then sort of let it sort itself out. Because let's say they get Charlie Collard free agency, and Todd Monken decides, hey, we want to be a bigger part of the passing game than he ever was with Baltimore. Well, you've got to figure out where he's going to fit into that. So is he 4? Is he 5? Is he 3? Whatever. That's another thing you've got to then figure out. And if they draft a kid, Sam Roush, If they draft another guy, figure him out, Sam Roush. But either way, that gives you a lot of options because, like, don't get me wrong, wide receiver, they need all the help they can get. But the way they've sort of set this thing up with David Njoku leaving, with, Blake Whiteheart and those type of guys, Brendan Bates and those guys are okay. I think the Browns, and particularly Monken's going to want to go, we can get better than this. I want to get somebody I want to get on the field more often at the time, as opposed to somebody I have to put on the field.
And I think that's what you're going to see as we get into the offseason. Todd Monken, it's an entirely different personality compared to Kevin Stefanski. Monken is going to tell you, I need this. This is what I want. This is what I need to have. And this is how we have to address it if we want to be from point A to point B to point C in a certain time period. I think that is where you're going to see a little bit of a difference in the relationship and how this team goes forward is due to the change in personality. And I believe that there's a respect and an unknown that you're going to get with Todd Monken just for seeing what he's accomplished at a few stops. And I think there's a belief that, hey, this guy gets it. They're going to try an entirely different concept and how they structure and do things due to what happened with this team over the last few years. And people are going to look at that and they're going to say, well, that's bullshit. Kevin Stefanski was, he was successful before. It has nothing to do with that. It's about perception, respect, the unknown, the demand, just the way he carries himself is a breath of fresh air to an organization that needed an influx. That's what it's going to get. This could be a total failure when it's all said and done, but the opportunity is there for them to do something different, and that's what you're going to see happen here.
Well, better not be a total failure because they're digging an 80-foot deep hole down in Brook Park, and they're filling it up with money.
I've been watching that show daily.
Yeah, they got to get it together, and soon if they're going to want to sell those tickets. That's for sure, because the tickets ain't going to come cheap. I want to talk about quarterback a little bit. We've all been very reasonable here so far tonight, talking about, the methodical approach of, getting a Titus Howard and how they're going to approach the offensive line. Things get a little bit crazy when you start talking about quarterbacks. We heard this week in Indianapolis that there's going to be open competition, that, Andrew Barry was asked 10 times whether he wanted to have a number one wide receiver quarterback before training camp, and, said basically, I don't care. And open competition sort of translates to me as we don't know. We have no idea what we're doing here. They're publicly talking up the room, but privately looking into potential alternatives. But I don't see this team either landing or being in the mood for a Malik Willis. At, maybe you can get him $25 million for 2 years, but I think that's optimistic given the need for quarterbacks around this league. Pete?
I've said all along, this was never going to happen. The Browns will make their pitch. They will put in the effort and say, we're going to present you this vision of what we think we can be. But the problem is that the vision needs time to take place, and Malik Willis is almost certainly going to sign before the Browns have a chance to build it, even if it's within this free agent period. He's potentially going to be one of the first dominoes to fall. He's got one shot at this. He's going to want to go somewhere he can be successful right now. There are teams that are built to sort of help him win right now and be better. Arizona certainly stands out. They've got more weapons. They've got better blocking already. There's some things they can do to help him. But Miami Dolphins have more things in place, as another example. Hell, Pittsburgh has more in place. He's going to have a lot of options. So he's got one shot at this, and he doesn't want to end up like Justin Fields, where he goes to the New York Jets, and then nobody's going to think about Justin Fields this year again in a serious way in terms of the quarterback position. So he's got to hit this thing and be effective. So that immediately puts the Browns at a massive disadvantage. And I don't know that they want to go that route realistically. I mean, they're going to do this because Todd Monken wants to win football games, and Andrew Berry understands the the nature that they need to do the things to make themselves look like a serious organization. But they also seem to be very enamored with the 2027 class. They're going to do work on the 2026 class and see what is there, nothing. And they are going to have to pivot into another direction when he almost certainly signs somewhere else. And they can make a more compelling pitch to other players that I think can keep them in the range of being a party of the 2027 draft, which is, I think, where they want to be, and significantly raises the floor for 2026, which they have to do. The competition thing sounds great, but here's the problem. Every time that somebody's asked about the quarterback position, they go, yeah, we're going to look outside the organization at options, or they're going to dance around it and say to be determined. That is a yes. That is a giant yes. We're looking at other options. They are not pretending, because if they didn't, they would say, we feel good about the guys we have in the building. Even if they're not saying it's Shedeur Sanders, they're not saying it's Watson, and they're not saying it's Dylan Gabriel. They would say, we feel good about the guys in the building. They are never even approaching anything to that. They're going, yeah, we like that Shedeur can do this. Deshaun Watson has done this and all this other, but they are constantly giving themselves an out because they know better, and they have to get something more serious than that. And if they bring in a veteran and Shedeur Sanders can beat that guy out, he will have accomplished something. He will have obviously taken a big step forward and proven that he's better than a guy who's done it in the league at some level, as opposed to beating up tomato cans and husks like Deshaun Watson at this point in his career. So that part is super important, to get something else in here to give them a floor, because you can't, the much was made of this whole thing with, selling the locker room on the quarterback room they had last year. And then people are talking about bringing in an even less serious quarterback room this year. And you're then going to tell the Myles Garrett and all these other guys that this is what we're doing. They've resisted every temptation to endorse anyone either. So they all know that the quarterback position is not settled by any stretch right now.
Well, Ty Simpson is having a moment, guys. He is rising up draft boards, even though there's no games being played. And I'm hearing a lot. And if you read my bloviation, I'm skeptical about Ty Simpson, because just watching him play, I wasn't sold this last year.
Which part did you watch? Did you watch the first half of the year, or the last third to a quarter when he was legitimately physically destroyed? Which part did you watch of Ty Simpson?
I didn't catch the Louisiana Monroe game, but I watched the Big Ten. I watched games that are critical. So I was watching them more at the end of the year.
You slept through the playoff game.
You're convinced that was the Ty Simpson that we want to see?
My thing with Ty Simpson is, I think he's fun. I think he's interesting. I think there's stuff there. He is not better than Jackson Dart was last year. And the Browns had the opportunity to go up and get Jackson Dart, and they said no. Yep. So are you going to then potentially pay a higher sticker price for Ty Simpson now? That seems very dubious and like a bad strategy to me. I think the experience is concerning. I think there's a lot of things you can sit there and go, man, he's really interesting. And the fact that Alabama had no running game certainly hurt him. And he makes a hell of a lot of throws, and you sit there and go, man, there's a lot that you could get out of this kid. But again, if you wanted to pull the trigger on Jackson Dart last year, you could have. They didn't. I would just say it's bad practice this year that then say we're going to pay a higher premium to get Ty Simpson and hope that he's going to end up being better, when Dart had 3 years of starting experience. He was a better athlete, obviously offered something with his legs, had shown more in terms of being a passer and all these other things. To me, that's just bad business. And look, they have to take the look. They have to do the work. And I think Ty Simpson really helped himself in terms of the combine. I think he presents himself very well, but I still don't think that's a realistic avenue in terms of spending premium picks. And if he's there at 24, it's a conversation, because at that point you can then say, well, we don't think this draft class is as good as last year's was, if you really want to. I don't know if that's a good argument to make, but at least you can try to make it. Or you can say, we feel like we're in a better position to put a rookie quarterback into this team than we were last year and make that. But I think ultimately the sticker price is going to be too high unless he falls, which is possible, into the second round. And you sort of go, look, it's at this point, the price is too good not to take a swing, because if he's not good, we can go right back at this thing in 2027.
And I'm going to add to this, because this is a situation where, yes, I don't believe at this point in time, Ty Simpson is as good as Jackson Dart. And I don't know if he'll ever be as good as Jackson Dart. But this kid is fundamentally good, mechanically good. He just took a hell of a beating last year in an Alabama offense that was really freaking inept, except with him throwing the football. The thing it comes down to is the difference between a year ago and today is that the changes the Browns have made, and we're talking about your head coach, how they're going to look at offense. I can't talk about this enough. It's going to be an entirely different type situation than it was a year ago when Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Barry were, arm in arm, kumbaya. Let's not pick this guy. Let's do this, do that. They're in a situation where they've basically told their head coach that, we want to win, and we're going to try to win, and we're going to do everything we can to win. Todd Monken is going to want a certain type of guys, a certain type of quarterback. So when I sit there and I look and listen and I hear all the noise from Ty Simpson and Carson Beck, all this crap. The thing that you got to take very seriously and just remember is that if it comes down to a situation where your head coach does not feel that he has something that he can really work with, they're going to look very hard at this. And there's that personal relationship with Simpson. Don't overlook that, because if there's anybody who knows everything about this kid, it's Monken. Monken talks to those guys there. It's the same thing with an offensive tackle down in Georgia. The Browns are going to be gaining the most intel possible about an offensive tackle played at Georgia, just because of those relationships. I think the Todd Monken thing is going to be much more important and impactful for this organization right now heading forward than it's been the last couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see what transpires. If he wants the quarterback, there's going to be some juggling going on to see where they're going to go with it.
We'll see. Here's the thing. When you get into this, and this happens every time that a guy who has recently been in college suddenly gets a head coaching job, they always go back through and they go, well, he coached these guys and he tried to recruit these guys. And the reality is it really doesn't translate all that much. I'll take the most recent example. How many Michigan guys has Jim Harbaugh added to the Chargers? Not many. There's two guys I can think of who did. Butch Davis, who sucked.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up.
He picked Gerard Warren because we recruited him when he passed on two Hall of Famers when they knew they were set to pick one of them. And the other one is Steve Spurrier, who sucked. So I don't discount that as a possibility. Those relationships matter in terms of getting some insight. But it's always interesting because we always think, and I saw this happening to the Combine where people are like, Oscar Delp, come on down. You're going to be playing for the Browns. Like, it really doesn't translate that. And the other part about that is there are about 7 quarterbacks who have relationships with Monken too. So you actually get lost because he knows so many of these quarterbacks as he was at Georgia, and they get to talk to all the top prospects, and he's known some of these kids forever. I think that can lead you down a dubious path in just terms of getting too far down the road and being like, well, he knows them and all these other things, so of course it's going to be a match. And certainly that could be the thing. Maybe there's certainly an insight with Monroe Freeling where he's like, yep, love this kid. Everything about him. I know he's been here from when he got, out of high school to where he's at now. And he's everything I want. That could certainly be the case. But like, it's one of those things where I get a little bit skeptical because I've seen it before and everybody like, Jim Harbaugh's the best example where I saw, he left after the national championship team and everybody's like mocking all Michigan players. And he took one. Yep. He took one guy. He passed over all the rest of them.
See, this thing all comes down to the insight, the intel, all that knowledge to make the most educated evaluation and decision on X player. Just because he coaches them or doesn't or knows them, any head coach, any coach worth their salt, they do their best to eliminate any kind of bias out of this equation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. What we can only hope for and achieve is that him having this ability to know these guys or know more about them or being tight with the head coach there helps them, build that book when they make that decision. And that's what this has to be all about. And anything other is going to be just another failure in the process. They did a hell of a job last year in what they did with the draft and how they evaluated, and then they investigated, and they went back and back and back talking to these guys. And they did a lot of this so quietly. It was amazing. And I anticipate that we're gonna see that personnel group doing those type of things, with Monken getting his fingers all over it with his input. Do I think it's going to change who they select in the overall grand scheme? Here and there, maybe, but I don't think anything just hugely drastic, because usually a front office and a scouting department that's worth their salt, when it gets to that time where you put your board together, you guys are pretty joined at the hip. You can have like a slight disagreement with a guy at 3 and a guy at 4, but it's usually not anything drastic. And it's the same thing with what you see right now with we go through a combine and everybody says that Joe Blow and Harry Roy, they just jumped their draft stock dramatically. And they turn this whole thing into this astronomical thing of players flying up and down the board. And it doesn't work that way. You get a player here and there that, slots himself in a better position. That happens. That's just a natural progression of this thing. But all this horse shit that you read and listen to out there, it doesn't play that way.
Yeah.
The other part is I don't, despite the fact that Tommy Rees was at Alabama and then Notre Dame, I don't think he got a single player attached to him when he was the offensive coordinator. And I don't think the Browns have ever gotten a guy that had much attachment to Ephraim Banda, who was a defensive coordinator in college either.
Nope.
To your point, I think the value is insight, and the value is Todd Monken being able to say to the scouts, hey, you need to talk to this guy about said player. He's going to give you the real dope on this thing, because that's the key. It's finding the real people you need to talk to at these various programs to get a true sense of these guys, as opposed to guys who are just going to tell you everything that's rosy about these guys and won't give you the nitty gritty and the stuff you really got to find out. That's where I think Todd Monken can be super valuable with those guys, is being able to say, listen, you got to talk to the strength coach. You got to talk to the staff at the rec center, whatever it is, about getting a true feel of where these guys, these guys are and who they are truly, as opposed to necessarily has connection to Todd Monken, therefore Browns will take him.
See, that's where he got some heat when we talked about the moves that he made on the offensive side of the ball with his coaching staff. And we talked and said things about, these guys are teachers. These guys are grinders. These guys dig in the dirt. That's who he is too. And that's what he's surrounding himself with. And this is what they're going to look for when they start talking about these players and the kind of guys they want. They're going to dig deep because they want to know that you live and breathe football. They don't want some guy who's sitting there playing video games 16 hours a day and then decides it's time to go practice or work out. They want football players. They want guys who want it as much as they do. And this is where it's going to be interesting to see what transpires this offseason, just with the changes in the organization, and see what kind of moves they make that displays that characteristic.
If we're not going to draft the guy, a quarterback, to lift the floor in that room, as they say, then maybe we go out and get one of the veteran quarterbacks that are out there. I'm hearing lots of interesting rumors or speculation that's out there. Last week, the speculation was all about Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver. This week is Anthony Richardson. It's his time in the sun. And I was just wondering, Lane, I'll start with you. You think there's anything to that?
To Anthony Richardson?
Yeah.
To the story or him as a player?
Either.
Because actually, I would say they're pretty comparable. I don't think there's a lot there. Anthony Richardson is an athlete. He runs well. He does those things well. He can throw the ball. But he is not that personality that lives and breathes football. Injured, has issues, had issues in his own locker room. I was told that, Indy's reaching out to everybody and their mother about a deal with him. And I heard that there's nothing happening with Cleveland at this time. And for the sake of this organization, I hope there isn't, because just because the guy is athletic and can run doesn't mean he's Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Doesn't mean that that's the only type of guy that Todd Monken can coach. So let's get away from that narrative.
Look, to the extent that he is a young quarterback, theoretically with upside, who's young, in fact, still younger than Shedeur Sanders, and can be had for nothing, if it's a 5th round pick or whatever, that all tracks. But I cannot think of a more anti-Todd Monken quarterback than Anthony Richardson, outside of the fact that he is mobile. He has started 15 games. One of them was good. Shedeur Sanders has that many good starts already in 7 games or whatever. One good start in 15. He spent the rest of his time injured, fielding questions about work ethic. He once took himself out of game because he was tired. And coming out of the draft, he was diagnosed with a chronic back issue.
Yep.
And for Todd Monken, who's saying every day is 4th and 1, I cannot think of anyone who's less interested in this than Anthony Richardson. And if you are, the Shedeur Sanders fans, that group that lives and dies by his reps, on this one, I will agree with them. Every rep that Anthony Richardson gets compared to Shedeur Sanders, because if it's an open competition, he's got to get reps, is a waste of everybody's time. I think the same thing with Deshaun Watson. Every rep he's going to get is ultimately going to prove to be a waste of time, even though I understand they have to at least look at him.
Yep.
Hopefully he's going to be practicing in that dirt pit while everybody else is in Berea, but whatever. The bottom line, though, is you are literally throwing away reps on a kid who has not shown anything. And, let's say for the sake of argument that Anthony Richardson shows you a glimpse of something that's even reasonable. Are you then going to pay him a ton of money? No, because you can't trust him to stay healthy or do any of the other things. And, we talk about all the stuff that comes down to the quarterback's position, and Lane sort of touched on it. Is anything other than being big shown from Anthony Richardson to say he's going to lead your franchise? No. They have the culture trying to get rid of him because they're tired of making excuses for him. That's the antithesis of what this team should be going for in terms of the veteran market. There are guys out there who can be professional quarterbacks. If it's Jacoby Brissett, if it's Geno Smith, if it's one of these other guys, and a lot of these guys may end up getting cut, which is why I suggest that the Browns could theoretically sneak in there and go, hey, we'll give you a quick pick to just take the contract off your hands, and we'll just have our starting quarterback, which would make a whole lot of sense for them. But
now you're talking about guys who are all serviceable, who've played in this league, that can get the job done and keep you moving forward in an interim time.
And they're professionals. They're adults.
Yep.
Anthony Richardson, to this point, has not proven to be a professional quarterback, which, adding to this room, getting a 4th unserious quarterback, the Browns would have the least serious quarterback room in the league for a guy who, and look, Todd Monken may feel really good about his prospect of being here in 2026 based on the contract, based on another season based on his contract. But Jimmy Haslam has straight up said twice, you better win more football games. So if you're telling me Anthony Richardson is going to be part of that equation, I think you're crazy. Could the Browns do this? Yes. And if they do it, I'm going to say the same thing. This is a bad idea and an utter waste of time, even if I sort of understand looking through a keyhole why a team would do it. I just don't think it's the Browns. I think it's going to be a team. I'll tell you, teams that make sense for him would be somebody like Carolina. Carolina, who's saying, we want to get rid of Andy Dalton because we want younger at the backup quarterback position, and we want to get somebody who's going to be more fit to what we do on offense. He could be a good, facsimile of what Bryce Young is doing for Carolina and sort of maintain what the offense is doing. Bringing him in to be a competitor in a starting competition is completely ridiculous and unserious.
Well, I'll take that as a no on Anthony Richardson then. I think with that, we're going to wrap up this show. More to talk about the quarterback position. We're going to have plenty of Monday nights to do it. And Pete Lane, just thanks as always for showing up and helping me out here on Gang of Three. It's been a lot of fun tonight as usual. We will be back next Monday night at 7:15 for another edition of Gang of Three. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Good night.